to build the right org and to build a TA machine, you put the work in the front end. If you do that the right way, then you're going to have a much more successful outcome. So for me, it's a couple of things. It's really having conversations around org design, around role design. And I talk about roles, jobs as what are we hiring this person to deliver instead of what are the things they will do each day. That's fine. That's how they'll get there. But what are the outcomes that we really want to see from people?
Hey, this is Gareth Webb, and you're listening to Breakout, a show that cuts through the hiring noise. Here, you'll get an unfiltered view on what early and growth stage companies are doing so that you can take their best practices, processes, and frameworks and implement them to help you build teams more confidently. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in again. It's Gareth here at Breakout, the podcast by Outscout. I'm joined today by Jenn Gardener, who is VP of People at CharterUp. It's a business I'm sure most won't have heard of, although kind of had a meteoric rise recently in terms of its performance and market share. I will not take up the time to introduce. I'll pass that over to you, Jenn. So welcome to the show. First of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Do you want to give our listeners an intro to yourself and CharterUp? Give everybody lay of the land.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gareth. Super excited to chat. I always love our chats whenever we get together. So Jenn Gardener, I've been working in the people space for 15 years, over 15 years. I've been with CharterUp as VP of People for the past 6 months. CharterUp is a marketplace for bus charters. So based out of Atlanta, but with hub in Austin and remote first for the most part. Huge focus on TA. Over the past 6 months, talent acquisition, as we are, as you mentioned, in kind of hyper growth mode right now. So that's how we got to know each other. Prior to CharterUp, I spent 2 years as CPO at June, which is a global prop tech marketplace as well. So also built out the people function there, grew the team through the hyper growth phase of the business. Prior to that was a senior director of talent at Casper, the company that disrupted the mattress industry. And then before kind of startup and disruptor marketplace days, really grew up in kind of large public commercial organizations. It's where I really learned kind of the ropes of people and talent. And so very excited to chat today.
Yeah, saying you're in hypergrowth mode in 2023 is kind of a weird thing to hear. And it's a very nice thing to hear. Yeah, to me, this is wild. Like, before we go into the people side of the conversation, so, we talk to founders, we talk to all folks at the exec level, people or like functional leaders. It was wild to me when we first got introduced to CharterUp that I was like, how's this not a thing? Which is always the aha moment with a good business. Like, what Uber did not do this. Why did they not do it? Lyft did not do this. Why did they not do it? They obviously had the technology available, just not the customer understanding. So can you tell people what that means, like the bus chartering? Because I think for a lot of people, it's like, how's there a big tech play there? Like, what is the deal with the product?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was one of the things that drew me to CharterUp as well. I have a joke with Amir, our CEO, that I stalked him until he would get on the phone with me and give me a job, because I found CharterUp as an organization, as a company, because I love a company that is disrupting an industry with technology. And, if you think about the bus industry or charter buses or shuttles, company shuttles, things like this, you don't think about really kind of any kind of state-of-the-art tech or anything new happening in recent years. But CharterUp's really done that. So if you think of like an Expedia, where, you need a hotel and a flight today, you're going to go on Expedia. You're not going to go to every hotel or airline website. So with CharterUp, if you need, you need a charter for 10 of your friends to the Taylor Swift show, or you're the New York Giants and you need to take...
If you can afford a bus after that, yeah.
That's right. Or, you're the New York Giants and you need to take the team around, you're going to come to us, because we have hundreds of partners all across the United States, bus operator partners, and we have technology to just make the best experience possible. Everything from live bus tracking to really, really high standards of operations from our partners, and the best pricing with our marketplace model.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's just like, that's the whole piece, isn't it? It's like, you're not. It's good. There's quite a lot of logistics there. It's not one ride for one person to one place. It's a big group of people. If something goes wrong, there's more at stake. You have obviously like enterprise and corporates using your service for moving employees around campuses and facilities and stuff like that. Yeah, it's very good. I like one of the examples we had, which I think was it Tesla here in Austin that I think may have used you guys, because when they were building the Gigafactory, they didn't want people not turning up to work. So it's like, well, we're going to make sure you get there because of the deadline. So the construction folks literally had door-to-door service, which is insane, but impressive. Very good. And so 6 months in, like to the point which you're prepared to be candid, like what did you turn up and see? What were you like, oh shit, I need to fix this? What's happened in the first 6 months of you being there?
So a lot of org design, a lot of hiring of some really critical roles. I think we were at a point, or kind of still are at a point, where we're growing out of, startup phase and really elevating as a business and how we work. So a lot of new roles, new leadership. And I think, the company started in office in Atlanta and everyone was together, and then the pandemic hit and people dispersed, and then, started hiring remotely. So didn't necessarily intend right away to become a remote first organization. So really focusing there on, now that we are this remote first org, we're 165 people now. We're not just a handful of folks in the Atlanta office. How do we really maintain community and make sure that we are, working together in the best way possible as a remote team?
Mm-hmm. So it's like org design, leadership, scaling out leadership, and looking at kind of how you scale culture, or like you said, community. Community's maybe a better word for it. I struggle with the term a little bit. I used to really love the whole term of culture, and I think it's sort of different now. I think people view it as a different thing because people don't want to be forced, like, what does culture mean? But I think community is a really good way of explaining it, because I think that's more about belonging, right? And feeling you're with people who you care about and they care about you. Whereas culture's like, this is what we're doing. You need to fall into this kind of framework.
I think you're right. That's really interesting. I think, there are two separate sides to that. So when people ask me, like candidates ask me all the time, right, what's the culture there? And sometimes I'll say, well, what does culture mean to you, to your point? But, when the first things I think about our culture is super high performing. We, everyone on the team, on all of the teams, just holds themselves to a really high standard, has really high expectations for ourselves, for our team, for our business. And I think that's, that's why we've been able to be so successful. I mean, the business has been profitable since inception, where, it's a strange thing to say for a tech startup, a tech company in 2023, hypergrowth. And it's a little scary, but we're smart about our growth. But yeah, so the culture is, to me, is kind of how we work, how we do things, what's accepted, what's not, right? And community is really feeling like, you are part of something. You are, you're able to be authentic at work, and you're able to, talk about your life or your family and whatever version of life that is for you, and feel like you're still, you're still welcomed and you're included. So that part to me is really important. And, one of the things I did when I first joined was I talked to as many people as would have me on their calendar. And some of the things I heard were like, I love it. I love the work that I do, but I kind of feel like I'm on an island, because I'm a sales rep. I'm on the phone all day with customers, but I don't necessarily get to, have more interactions with my team or cross-functional teams. So I've done a lot of work around that. And we've seen a great response so far. There's so much more to do, but just kind of really always thinking about how do we bring people together.
Yeah, I think one of the things we know from candidate data and things that people tell us and things that they tell us they like or don't like is like finding somewhere with that good combination of purpose for end users and purpose, like impacting customers positively, especially not to keep going on about it, but like post-COVID, and then now with like more financial strain on organizations, like I think talent is smartening up to the idea of like, well, I want to work somewhere that's doing something really useful, because it will be more marketable, but it also makes them feel good, right, about the work they're doing. And there's lots of companies out there, and there's lots of companies still hiring, so there's plenty of choice where people can go. But then the second piece of that is like, if I'm there, I also like, life's too short, and I think that everyone feels that way at the moment. It's like life's too short to feel isolated or not feeling like I can sort of be myself and be valued. What are some of the things that you have done to sort of counter that feeling of being on an island?
Great question. So one of the things we did, which was really fun, was I heard that actually a lot from our marketplace sales team. So our team that takes calls from our customers. So, someone wants to book a charter for their wedding, they call, we get them their trip. And they are, they're on the phone with customers all day. They love the work, as I mentioned, but didn't feel like they were necessarily connected. So we did 2 really fun kind of 3-day offsites. We did one in Austin. We did one in Atlanta. It's funny because we have concentrations of people in both cities, and they kind of swapped, right? So that they could go somewhere where they don't live and explore a new city, and just had a really nice time. Just, spend time with our CEO, Howard, our president, and did some really good learning and future planning for the team, but also just had fun, when there was a mechanical bull involved. I wasn't there for that one. They didn't invite me to that one, but, just a fun time, just getting together, just those things that you miss when you're not in the office.
Yeah, probably nothing more a leveling experience of work hierarchy or ego than a mechanical bull and a couple of beers. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like the office swap is just straightforward, isn't it? You don't have to you're not sending people off to an exotic location, but they're away from home. They get to see a different side to the business, and those relationships can probably have a big impact down the road of how business behaves.
There were a lot of bonds. I mean, my team and I had not yet met my team because I had just joined. The first one we did I joined in January. We did one in February and then one very early March. And it was the first time I met my team. And I mean, just the 3 of us being together was incredible. It was great.
Yeah, it's very good. I think more and more companies, we spoke recently. So the podcast we released today actually was with the VP of revenue at a company called Hubble, which is like workspace on demand. So they don't own properties, but they're like you. They're like the marketplace for a desk or a meeting room or an office. They're scaling in the US a little bit, but I think they will get a lot bigger because WeWork doesn't quite solve the problem. Like WeWork's like one place, you get a card.
I'm actually familiar with Hubble because my last company, we had more space than we needed because we were global and remote also, but ended up with more space than we needed. And yeah.
Oh, right. So, yeah. So they're doing a lot of sort of conversations with people leaders, ops leaders, founders. And it's, I had the same thing last year where we had a really nice office in downtown, just outside downtown Austin. We were using it less frequently as weeks went by because everyone was like 1 day from home, 2 days from home, 3 days from home. Some people moving away. It's like, what are we doing? So, and they didn't allow you to sort of fractionalize that. So I think, there's still a way to go for everybody. But I think if you've got good hubs, like talent's easier to get, easier to keep, easier to connect people. I think fully remote work from home can be fine. You can do those things off site. You don't have to have an office necessarily, but I think getting people out of people can get into slumps, right? Just being at home fully all the time.
Yeah. And it's not just the in-person. I think, a lot of kind of magic can happen when you do that once in a while, but it's just being intentional about communication. I always say, over communicate when you can. And, we recently did an all company, all hands, which I love to do. We'll continue doing those and just, sharing information. People get to hear from our leadership team. People get to hear about what other teams are doing. People get to share what their teams are doing. We get to celebrate, anniversaries, new roles, new hires. My new hire slide was giant. I put up because I didn't have enough time to go through everyone. I put all their faces on there. Just, having those moments of coming together and, kind of energizing and being excited. We have, we use Slack for, we have a community Slack channel where we do everything from, post pictures of charter bus in the wild when we see them out, to, screenshots of really great customer reviews or really touching customer reviews. We talk to people during really, kind of sensitive and special moments in their lives. A lot of the times, you think wedding, you think that the high school lacrosse team going to the States, right? These like very emotional times that we're with people. So that's lots of fun. And then, right now we're in Pride. So all of our Pride comms and conversations are happening. So, you just have to work at it. It's not, I think as long as you're intentional about it, then remote first is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it's really, it does need work, and you need to be, I think it needs, what I've realized as well is like, I go into, if I lead things too much internally, I feel a bit cringy because I watch all these Instagram reels of people mocking their workplace, trying to make work fun. And I'm like, oh, I know that goes on, but it shouldn't stop you from doing it. You just got to do it well. So I've sort of made a bit of a rule that like it gets passed around a bit as to whose idea that we're executing and what we're going to do when we meet up.
Force the fun. Don't force the fun.
No, exactly. And yeah, try and build consensus, which is obviously difficult. But I want to go back to so building out, scaling the team, but specifically the critical hires, the leadership positions. We've talked about this before, but like, how do you go about, like, I'm not talking CharterUp pre-gen, I'm sort of CharterUp now. How do you go about building out these positions, defining positions, making sure that the hires are made the right way, get the right person in the seat, and that like alignment is initiated well?
Yeah, I think, for me, the talent acquisition process and what I've learned over the years is that, to build the right org and to build a TA machine, you put the work in the front end. The work in the front end, that doesn't always happen. And if you do that the right way, then you're going to have a much more successful outcome. So for me, it's a couple of things. It's, it's really having conversations around org design, around role design. And, I talk about roles, jobs as what are we hiring this person to deliver, instead of what are the things they will do each day. That's fine. That's how they'll get there. But what are the outcomes that we really want to see from people? So really kind of scoping out and defining those. I'm also stingy because I mentioned, hyper growth in 2023 is a strange thing to say. I come from years and years and years of large retail organizations in my background. I never want to do another layoff. I never want to do another reduction in force. So I am stingy, but I have great partners who work with me. As long as we put in the work in the front end. So what we do, one of the things that we really focus on is we build out scorecards for every role that we launch. Every single role that we launches with a scorecard. How we use that scorecard is, first we define why are we hiring this job? Don't tell me in fluffy JD language, job description language. Tell me, why do you need this person? And if I can dig in and say, well, that person can do it, or that person can do it, or that person can do it. If not that, then okay, we need this job. What are the outcomes? Again, all outcome based. So how will you know that this person is successful? What do you need them to deliver? Not just what do you need them to do every day, but what do you actually need them to deliver? And then, what are the kind of competencies? So what are the behaviors, what are the competencies that you need from this person, that you need this person to, to possess, to be able to deliver those things in the best way, right? So we define that first, and that work ahead of time. Sometimes I mentioned I have wonderful partners, so no one ever groans when we first talk about this, but someone could groan because they go, oh, I wrote the JD, I'll just know it when I see it. I don't I'll know it when I see it, because there are so many, unconscious biases, so many things that can come into play there with know it when I see it. So if you really define it first, and you're making sure that you're putting resources where you actually need resources, B, you're building out, you're essentially building out onboarding plan. You're building out, 30, 60, 90. You're building out their kind of talent check-in, talent assessment over the next, however many quarters, years, et cetera, because you're nailing that down from the beginning, what you need this person to deliver. And then we define in that kind of pre-kickoff session also who will interview. We have the same people interview each role. So it's apples to apples. And we identify, who will focus in which area. And, that way people get the same questions. Each candidate gets the same, number of questions, types of questions. Obviously we don't, it's not a script. We will dig wherever we need to, but, there's so much, I think, that goes, or that comes from kind of consistency and making sure that you're evaluating all the candidates in the same criteria. So we do that kind of front end work, we do that front end work. And then, by doing that, we know 100% what we're looking for, and we can go get it.
Yeah. I think we try to look at positions as kind of like a product spec, like what's the outcome, what's going to help achieve the outcome, then the kind of like to-dos and all the traits and the characteristics. But most specs, problem with job specs that get written, say a hiring manager goes off and writes a job spec, what I find most of the time comes back is a hugely verbose war and peace that doesn't matter how well it's written, it may not get read. Like starting off with like 10 bullet points, working backwards from the outcome, and then the traits, and then like, okay, what's the stack rank? Like I've had another debate with a VP of people who she actually said to me that unconscious bias, I won't say her name, unconscious biases, and she's like, they're just good judgment gauges. And I was like, well, no, not always, because things change. So like if you're just constantly hiring for the same thing with every way you hire, and you want X school, X company, X type of brand, like, yes, they may have been a barometer for quality in the past, but I don't think that's the same now, with things changing. So when you said to me, when we spoke the other week, and you talk about scorecards, like I typically do the opposite of a groan, because I'm like, here we go. Like, we can just get this done properly, because
that's why we like each other. One of the reasons.
Yeah. Yes, I think so. It's like, I say this quite a lot to my team, but it's like, I can't remember. I think it's one of your US presidents that said it, and I've gone blank, but it's like, if you've got 5 hours to chop down a tree, spend the first hour sharpening the blade of the axe, and then the rest is a lot more straightforward. I think hiring is just like, I have to repeat that a lot with companies and execs and teams. It's like, don't just shoot us a spec and say, right, let's start seeing people. I'm like, no, like, let's talk, let's organize this information, let's actually just put the spec aside for one moment, because it's, candidates don't read them, or they don't read them properly, and that's not necessarily any fault of their own. So yeah, I think scorecarding and getting organized, being data driven up front. So how do you if people do groan, I mean, you're saying like, hey, this is what we're doing, what's your sort of like rebuttal to that? What's your counterpoint? Obviously, it's just the way it is because you're VP of people. But
honestly, this is gonna sound untrue. It's not true. I don't get a lot of groans. If I get a little like, ooh, that's not what I'm used to, we talk through it, like we just did, and we will find them the best candidates in a shorter amount of time after we have these conversations and do a little work sharpening our axe. So it's really it hasn't been much of a grown. There's also tons of data, right? There's tons of data behind it. Like, there's something like 30%, or women are like 30% less likely to be sourced for a role than a man with the same characteristics. However, if you have this scorecard and you start with, we need this outcome, this outcome, this outcome, and then we see two profiles, and they both can touch the same or can achieve the same outcomes. There's no kind of, you can't deny it. It's what we've identified. So, I mean, even like, women and people of color are less likely to apply for a role unless they meet, 70+%, I might be off with the number, but of the criteria, so making sure that it's really, it's defined and not just fluffy language.
Yeah, no, I could definitely say that I think it's too easy for people to apply to stuff anyway. And if you don't get real tight on certain requirements on the front end, but then like to your point, then you make the way you go about the hiring and the way you present that information to people, make it a slightly more welcoming. I do want to talk about that because we've talked a bit about DE and I definitely feel like because hiring's dropped off the radar for so many companies in the last year, DE&I has also just kind of fallen off the wayside with many. There's like 2 years ago, it was all you could really sort of hear and read about in terms of companies' initiatives. And I think the recessionary environment and the layoffs and everything like that means it's like, oh, well, fiscally, maybe a CFO or hiring leaders have kind of said, well, that's not sort of so important anymore. And I know it is to you guys. How do you go about, once you've built out position, how do you go about making it more accessible to all types of talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that starts even with the build out of the role, right? Scope in the role. There's, making sure you're using inclusive language. And it's so interesting. Like I've been digging into inclusive language for the past couple of years, like more and more, and just learning more and more, because it's also always changing. The words we use are always changing. And so I want to make sure that, I'm doing my best to kind of stay educated. But there's really cool tech out right now. You can run a job description through and make sure that you're not using, strong too many times is, a male, it is perceived as a male word. Or
what does it even mean in strong, right, in the context of building software or selling software or marketing, or like, what does strong mean? Like robust or reliable, or
right, give me expert level. Yeah. So like there's like cool tech you can run things through. There's so many like, I'm giant nerd, but there's so many like tools. And
what are some, for anybody listening, there's kind of like, there's other giant nerds that will typically listen to this. Like what are those, what places can you guide people to that you would use any of those tools or resources?
There's UI include, I want to say is a really good one for job descriptions. We even like just internally, like I love Slackbot, like, pop up, someone writes, hey guys, you'll get a pop up and say, you're not using inclusive language. Right. And so just kind of prompting in those ways. I think there's it's fun.
We've joked about this before, but now that you have an Austin hub, like YARL is just the best inclusive term from my perspective anyway. But
that's it. I haven't jumped on the YARL train yet. I'm trying. I live in Florida now, as you know.
I thought you're Southern enough.
Well, yeah. One of these days.
It took me a while, and I was really self-conscious, and now I'm like fully on board the YARL train. So so from the position building to the description and the definition, what about like interview and assessment? Like how do you're very, I think when you joined, when we started working with CharterUp, pretty male dominated business overall. So like what, how are things done through interview process and scorecarding and feeding back on candidates?
Yeah. Well, tech, as we know, is male dominated business, right? So it's not specific to CharterUp, but yeah, I mean, it's something that my team and I are constantly focused on. I mean, and I think it starts from when you're sharpening your axe, I'm going to use that, Gareth. I really like that. Now, so when it comes from that pre-work. I won't say who. He's wonderful and a wonderful partner, but one of my business partners was talking about a hypothetical candidate, right? And saying, these guys are, this, they come from this companies. These guys are, they, and all I heard, what guys, because, and I said to myself, I don't believe so, but who knows? Maybe he's picturing a man in this role. So, I think one of the critical things that everyone needs to do. And it's not always easy to do, but you have to speak up in moments like that. So I said to him in that, in that conversation, like, you're saying guys, I feel like you're saying guys because you're from Jersey like me. And we say, hey guys, all these years, but is it, or like, tell me who you picture when you see this role. Like, oh my goodness. He said, I was saying guys, I'm not picturing a man consciously. However, I think it's just like stopping that from the beginning. And so that didn't continue through the interview process and through conversations with my team or, you and your team about the candidate. So it starts there. It starts with inclusive language on the JD. It starts with, with scorecarding. And then my team is just always, always, always focused. And as you are and your team are as well on just, providing a diverse pool for interviews. And,
you guys, and on that note, like you guys have, I think you guys have rightly so, performance. What you said at the beginning is what I think in terms of business, like everyone gets lost in culture, and culture really is about performance, and how you perform is kind of the nuts and bolts probably around what people do in terms of building out the culture of performance in a sustainable way. But like you guys have a high bar. I think you guys also, your team, I've just said guys, your leaders.
Progress. Yeah.
I'm probably talking about, Amir and Howard.
Right, you're actually picturing them. Yeah.
I am, yeah. And I know that, and some other folks who are interviewing, but like, I know there is a relatively high bar and a relatively tough set of standards, right, to get through interview into CharterUp. So what sometimes we hear from any client is, and this is male and female, like if people are a bit too tough on interviews, they get a bit defensive. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. You said you have the same people interviewing for the same role, asking the same questions. So you don't change the sort of nature of an interview depending on who they're interviewing.
That's right. And I think that's critically important because while yes, we dig in interviews, it's not, startups are not easy. Successful startups are not easy. It's fun. It's challenging. If you're someone who thrives in this environment and who wants to push a business forward and you want to see the impact of your work, like that's why people come and join a company like ours. So, yes, we don't let anyone through. I feel very proud that I got through, but I really was sweating it there for a while. But, I think tough is fine. Obviously professional, nothing that is not, unprofessional or not, good, but tough on everyone, right? There's another stat that I won't even try to remember, but it's something around women get asked X% more questions typically in an interview and have fewer time to answer each question, typically in an interview. Big study done. So isn't that interesting, right? So that's just one of those things that we can kind of knock out as long as we stick to our scorecards and stick to our areas where we're probing.
What do you think that is? Do you think, like, I would say what I think it potentially could be is that sometimes a male interviewing a female, sometimes a male interviewing another man they can bro out on an interview and it's all like chit chat and I think sometimes probably what that historical data comes for is males potentially scrutinizing female candidates more.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's that kind of, we would love to think that it's not real, but it is real. I've experienced it. I've had interviewers look at me like, really? Did you do that? Yes, I did that. I think talking about it, I think putting it out there and saying this happens and this is still happening and here are steps that we're taking to make sure it doesn't happen in our organization is important. Talking about these things is really important.
Yeah, I think so. Talking about it is good because it leads to probably what needs to happen, which is males probably needing to be coached on interviewing better, to be more stringent with other males and not feel like there's going to be conflict, and then being more like consistent with whoever they're interviewing, right? It's just be this, just I think with hiring in general, like there should be no surprises. Yes, you could surprise people with curveball, tough questions, but it shouldn't be too many surprises in general in any facet of a hiring experience. But I think that a lot of people that interview go too one way or the other. They go too tough on questioning, or they go too soft. Just be like firm, consistent, and direct.
They talk about their pets, or they, and the weather, or it's it's an interrogation. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people need to be taught how to interview better, and we've done a lot of interview training here. I learned how to interview better by coming here. I really did, from Howard, our president, who's my leader. I mean, he's incredible. He's built, businesses. He's been, hired by boards to select their leadership team, and I've learned from him. And so we've done a ton of interviewing. Not a ton. We've hit all hiring managers with our interviewing training. We'll continue to do it, continue to go deeper, but I think everyone can learn how to interview better.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that the flip side to people interviewing candidates and having to be coached is also to watch out for candidates that are really good at interviewing, because they exist, and that's a skill, and sometimes that is their best skill, is interviewing, and it doesn't always mean it translates into being the best employee and teammate at all.
You can dig that out.
Yeah. So I was going to say, on that note, how do you dig that out? Secondly, with Howard, you said like you've learned from him. I think he's very good at getting people. He likes to people answer directly, concisely. What did you learn from him? So first question there is like, how do you dig that out? Like just good interviewers, and stylistically or confidence wise or whatever it may be. Second question, like with Howard, like what's he helped with your improvement?
Yeah. So Howard has used pieces of the method that he learned from the book Who, the A method for hiring. When I first joined and Howard sent me a book on interviewing, I tried not to be offended.
Yeah, welcome, VV people. Here's a book on how to be better.
You just hired me to lead your people function and hire your team, and you're going to send me a book. Okay. I'm always open. So I popped the book open. It's really funny. And I joke because we had this conversation ahead of him sending me the book, but I had been following for years a number of pieces, of that theory, and was able to dig in a little deeper and learn a little bit more. I don't take everything from that book. I don't agree with everything from that book, but I'm not modeling exactly after, but I think there are some really critical pieces that, can just break through anyone who's a great interviewer, a not great interviewer, to understand really what is the likelihood of that person being able to produce the outcomes that you need for this role.
Right. So what would be some things to just like, there's some people have a very good innate BS detector, and I think I'm all right at that. Like, and I think some people are like, oh, well, this person come away from interviews, they're like, great. Like, I'm like, well, did you ask how that happened, and how did they instigate that? What else didn't work? Because if someone's gone through their career and they interview and nothing's never not worked, that's the first red flag for me, because like, it's irrelevant, like, as to how good you've been at certain times in your life. You will have failed if you've been working hard enough or trying hard enough. So yeah, what are some things that you look for? What's part of your BS detector for just good interviewers?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we highlight really heavily in interview training is not stopping until you hit a wall, not stopping until you understand, or not stopping until you understand exactly what happened, exactly what either, why that person left that job, or what they were responsible for in this, project or initiative that they're talking about, what they actually did, and what, even thinking about like individual contributors, like how did they stack up against their other team members, their peers. So really digging in until you can't get anything more out. Because if you just have people kind of so many interviewers just will walk through, walk me through your background, walk me through your history. Okay, great. People are always going to tell the highlight reel, so it's digging in. It's just really not stopping until you understand exactly what happened. And then also not stopping until you understand. Howard always says this. I feel like I'm repeating him, but as I said, I've learned a lot from him, but like not the limit of someone's capabilities, right?
Right.
Like how deeply are you able to think about this? How well are you able to explain this? How much have you done? So what's the limit?
Yeah. So like one of the ones I try to sort of say to the team is like, we try to filter for this anyway, just like mechanically through resume and LinkedIn profile, but multiple short stints. So, and if someone's like, oh yeah, I left there because I couldn't handle my boss. Oh, okay. Next question. It's like, well, no, hang on. Why couldn't you handle them? What do you try to do to improve it? Or I left this. You see this with AEs a lot. It's like, oh, I left there because they changed the comp plan. Okay, but like, even if they changed it and you stayed and earned slightly less, you might have been in a better position than just leaving another job. So why not try to go and influence or just deal with that and accept it? Like something bad happened to you, say you changed jobs. Like that just means that you can't handle change. So I think, to your point, I think more recruiters, hiring managers need to probe until, like you say, you hit the wall, which essentially you're satisfied with the answer, right? You're satisfied that it makes sense or it doesn't. And then it's either a green or a red based on how you make decisions.
Yeah. Those first calls are so critically important too. I think when we're working with your team, those first calls that you're having or your team is having, or if it's, my team recruiting for something internally, it's those first calls are so critical. And I always say to my team, this is your chance to show the business what you think good talent is. So dig. That screen may take you a little bit longer, but you're only getting, you're only putting through kind of the best of the best and your A players and, make me look good. That's what I say.
Yeah. Make us all help each other, for sure. Let's sort of move on to the other thing that we have talked about before, and I think in our very first conversation we talked about this, and it's a very divisive subject matter because it's changing, and it's changed a lot due to legislation. It's changed because of distributed teams and remote working, and it's still
generational norms.
Yeah, like just transparency being a thing, right? And there's like very, very big businesses now set up to help with this subject matter. So I think it's like worth talking about to sort of have other people listening think about. But that's the subject of compensation transparency. So when I first moved to the US 4 or 5 years ago, and one of the things that I looked at was like coming from the UK, which is, although we have GDPR, which is annoying, and you don't have that here really, the US is incredibly litigious, right? Like you can get served and you may not have done anything wrong, but that's then a headache for you. So I looked at the big no-nos, and it was just in various states you can't ask comp up front. So
that was one of the first big changes, right? I was working in New York when that happened, and that was what are we going to do when we can't ask people their compensation? They're going to, make more to come work for us.
How dare they? Yeah, exactly. How dare people move up in the world? Yeah, so we just had a blanket rule internally that we just not going to ask, even if it's in Texas or wherever. It's $250,000 fine. Someone told me that may or may not be accurate now, but I think a couple of years ago someone said if you ask in New Jersey, it's a hefty fine for you as a business. So we're okay, we're not going to do it. But what do you think that means? What does it mean to people in a talent function as a change in legislation and a change in cultural norms?
Yeah. I mean, I remember this topic first came up for us when we just started working together. I had just joined the business. You were already working with CharterUp. And, there was a Slack message of, well, this person, this would be a 30% increase for her. And I said, great, good for her. I don't know why it's a 30% increase. Maybe it's a much bigger job. Maybe she's underpaid where she is. Maybe she's coming from nonprofit. I don't know. But I don't care. I don't care how much, up, down, across. We're paying for the role. We're paying for the outcomes that we need this person to deliver. And so pay transparency for me. I mean, I'm constantly learning. Things are constantly changing. But like for me, it started, I mentioned I used to work in New York. So, started with that. And then a couple of years ago, it started New York was one of the first states to require a reasonable, real, people got around that, but salary range for each job posting. So it's one of the things that we started doing as soon as I got here, with Georgia, where we're based, not law there yet. And, my team at CharterUp, completely open to it. It's just something that hadn't been happening. It's not that it was intentionally not being done. It just hadn't been happening.
Well, and also they're probably just like focused on the business and the growth, right? And it's like, pay's a thing over there. But someone like you comes in and they're like, no, it's not a thing over there. It's like, it's central to talent strategy potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's one of those other things that you do the work, you do the research on the front end, and then it saves everyone time. I like to put it right at the top of my job descriptions, because if this doesn't work for you for that role, then then we'll save the conversation for another time. I don't want to play games.
Yeah, I think we're interviewing a few folks at the moment, and I spoke to somebody who is from a very different culture, much bigger company, big base, discretionary quarterly bonuses, and I was like, that won't be a thing here. Like you would be able to earn a lot more, but like we're so much smaller and early stage. I was like, I just want to tell you now, like I like you as an individual, but this compensation will look like this, and we sort of walked through it, and they were like, look, I appreciate that transparency. I can handle that. Like, yeah, you're telling me I can earn more, but I just won't have as big a base salary, and I'm joining an early stage company. I should probably sort of feel comfortable with that. So I just think these are things that again, like no surprises, right? It shouldn't get to the end and be like, oh, you're pulling an extra 30K on your base demand, where we've told you this is the range. So like, absolutely not. And then it also says something about reasonable people. I think like if people negotiate reasonably about comp or anything, then they are by definition more reasonable people to deal with and probably better to work with. If they get a little bit carried away, then they can probably get carried away in other areas of work.
I mean, I think it's reasonable to have the conversation again, as we do at the end, right? They've learned more. They've learned, they've learned what it takes to, to do this job and to do it well and to be at this company. So, it's worth revisiting again at the end. This is one of those areas too where I get super nerdy, because there's so many more tools. There's better and more and accessible tools out there now for comp benchmarking and for real comp benchmarking. It used to be you had to work at a big company and spend, tens of thousands of dollars to get these big reports that, may or may not be accurate, and took a whole, whole team, a whole month to put together. I use Pave. I think I talked to you about Pave, right? I use Pave, which integrates with our HRIS. So you have to give to get. You're not giving any, obviously, personal identifying information, but
yeah, they take basically pay data from you guys, they encrypt it all, right? And it's just by function, title, probably area code.
Compared to their, against their leveling structure, which is, very similar to what we were using anyway. And it integrates. So you're getting real time data. And since I've been using it, and I run every job through it, internal and external benchmarking, I always look internally before we're posting an open role or creating a new role. But it's never been wildly off, which is just a beautiful, beautiful thing, Because it's real. People are making right now. That's what's in HRS. And you can cut it a bunch of different ways. We don't rely heavily on geographic differentials. I mean, we're not paying everyone like San Francisco Bay level, because it's just cost of labor is the highest there. But we typically do like all US combined. Sometimes we'll go a little bit deeper if we're, if the role sits in Austin or a role sits in Atlanta. I want to make sure that we're looking at the right data, but so much at your fingertips now that didn't used to always be there. And it's free for us to use, which is like, I told you I'm stingy. and we're a
No,
startup.
you're not. You're stingy. What's the word? The word I would, I think we keep, Jake and I talk about this, and then we've heard it and we've sort of internalized it. It's like 22, 23 is like the return to rigor, which is like money's not free, so don't act like it's free. And I heard of a business recently that went out of business, and I heard that they're not even their own product technology costs, but like all the tools they were using, like Salesforce. They had Salesforce and HubSpot, and they probably had paid versions of everything you're talking about. But they were spending $8 million a year on just SaaS tools for their internal use. Not what? Yeah. I was like, well, there you go, and that's the kind of the mindset that the world's been in for the last sort of 5 to 10 years, actually, post the last recession. So, like when interest rates flattened and everything went crazy, I think, being stingy or frugal or clever or resourceful are very good things to bring into a business, especially with hiring as well, because we spoke to a company the other day that are probably going to land a Series C, maybe D. I can't remember which letter it was, but it was like Q4, and they're going to probably raise 100 million, and they're going to hire like 30 salespeople. And we were talking with the chief revenue officer, and he was like, "Look, like I want a program of hiring for that number of people, and I want it done slickly, but I'm not in the mindset of paying 20% on top of base salary for every single hire." And I was like, no, nor should you, because it's just not necessary. So I think everybody's getting more sensible. I think you still have to pay for certain quality of tools, but I think for you, to your point, like you give to get, so you're just giving data to get data. I think paid Carter is great, right, for transparency of equity.
Yeah, so
it's great, right?
Yeah. So you can get equity, benchmarking. It's great. It's really good.
Well, and the other thing that you've mentioned before that I'd never heard of, just while we're talking about these talent tools, because talent folks do love to sort of hear about these things, it is a benefits platform that you use. Is it Gravy?
Yes. So we use Gravy is our benefits provider. They're also a startup, and we're able to get really, really, really rich benefits through them. It's honestly, I say this to people and they probably think that I'm not being truthful because it sounds crazy, but it's that we have the most robust and kind of rich benefits plans that I've seen in over a decade, since companies started tipping away and not spending money there. We had May is Mental Health Awareness Month, among other things. And so I had an hour on an afternoon and I was like, I'm going to see what we really offer. And I was blown away. I was super excited. So, up it went on the community channel for mental health awareness, but free for it's first of all, we cover it for all of our employees. We fully subsidize the medical. And then it's just, teledoc therapist appointments, which is the only way I like to do therapy. Don't drag me into an office, but I will see you from the comfort of my desk. And I mean, so many other things, even like, for me also, as a lot of other people, physical health it plays a big role in your mental health and feeling strong and feeling good physically. So, access to all kinds of, really good like meditation apps and classes and virtual classes. And, these are things that were offered. It's interesting because these are things that were offered a lot, like a couple of years ago, that no one really, I worked at companies where we had all of these benefits, and talking about spending too much money, right? We spent a lot of money on all of these benefits that people didn't either know we had or didn't care about or didn't use. And I think now we are spending money in really smart areas and supporting our employees, in ways that really matter to them now. I mean, who doesn't need a therapist on the screen? Not me, so like in 2023, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's an investment that I think not all companies, not all startups are making right now, but I think it's a smart one.
Yeah, the thing I think that's changed, in my opinion, so I came out of college and started working in 2005 when it was obscenely hardcore and you couldn't take a morning to go to the doctors or the dentist. And, you were working 60 hours a week I was. And so it's like, no time for, I used to just squeeze in like 30, 40 minutes of gym and lunch. If I was a minute late at my desk, I got frowned at. So I think things have just changed gradually for the better, where I'm sure there's people of old who are like, nah, I wish it was the same. Like everyone in the office, see and hear the productivity. But like I have a Thursday annual, like I'm like geek out on quite a lot of stuff, but like I love getting my bloods done. Just like a game to me, it's like, can I get healthier every year?
Every time I would be into it, but I can't.
Yeah, I don't look at it. But I love getting the letter through in the mail with all the results. And so, just putting more time aside to actually be like, I say to the team as well, I'm like, hey, I haven't had a PTO request in a month. Like, what are you all doing? Like, put the PTO in, plan ahead of it, and then enjoy it. And so, because again, it got frowned upon when I was out of college, or when I was like, even like late 20s, and I was like working a pretty hard, like hardcore job, traveling around, like putting in PTO requests was frowned upon. And I think what's happened is, probably multiple factors, but like we had that big recession in 08, 09, which kind of like brought about more formality in the world, more informality in the world, because banking got decimated, and everyone sort of startups started to bubble up. And then obviously we had COVID, and I think there is some hypocrisy out there, but I think most leaders are pretty in tune now to the fact that if your team are like feel valued, and their time is valued, and their outside work is valued, then they probably will give you more back in work. There will be people who exploit that, and you just got to get those people out of your business quick time. But the people that don't exploit it, like you want to keep them, and you want them operating well. So we do the same thing. It's like, we either, you can either take a healthcare through like healthcare and various other benefits, and I try to sort of make sure on a probably like a quarterly basis that it's all getting used and the PTO is getting booked in. And we don't do, I used to do incentives for things that people might want. Like if you were the quarterly, like if you perform particularly well in a quarter in the team, you might get some things of monetary value. Whereas now we're like, hey, just like take Friday off. Like
time, what's more valuable? But I think this goes back to what we said earlier about like talking about these things. I think talking about these things and modeling behavior, especially as a leader, so critically important. Like, I mentioned therapy 5 times. Because why not? Right? Like,
no, because it is stigmatized, isn't it, from days of old?
So let's talk about it. I will, I'll put on my Slack or my out of office. My whole team knows when, I've got a Sarasota Sharks swim race for my kids, and I book out at 3:00 on a Friday to go see that. And I'm not just gonna. Does anyone care where I'm at 3:00 on a Friday? No, but I want to broadcast. I am leaving to go watch my kids swim, because if I do it, then I hope other people, see it and think they can do it too, because it's absolutely, I mean, that's the way my team operates. We know exactly what we need to deliver outcomes. We know what we need to deliver. We know what our roadmap looks like. I don't care when you get it done. I like to work at 2:00 in the morning because I don't sleep, because I drink too much caffeine during the day. But like, that's when, and then, so then I go, I go for 3 hours for a swim meet on a Friday afternoon. Like, as long as you're getting your stuff done, and you're excited about your role, then that is one of the beauties, yes, of not being 2008 anymore.
Yeah. I mean, amen. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't change it at all. Like, I have some funny stories that my team don't even believe me. Like, so in 2005, 6, 7, I was in a really cool office in like Soho in London.
In Soho in New York. I thought you were going to say you were in New York, and
Soho in London. And then in 2009, I used to travel to New York a lot. But like, so the evolution for me was like out of college into suit, shirt, tie. I couldn't even like I have to shave the morning of work. So if I shaved at night, because I had to get the train for an hour and a half commute and have a suit and tie on, if I shaved the night before just to sort of stop that neck crash, our managing director would walk around and he would be like, I'm actually good friends with him now, but like at the time I was like, you absolute piece of work. He was like, Gareth, did you shave last night? And I was like, yeah, I shaved last night, but like clean shaved with a razor. He's like, yeah, not cool. Go and get. So I had to go to like the equivalent of CVS and buy a razor and shaving foam and shave in the office to return to my desk. That was like what culture meant Yeah, and then I left that company, went to fund in a company in Europe, and traveled quite a lot, but no tie. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I don't have to wear a tie. And now I'm in a t-shirt and shorts because it's like 90 degrees here. But yeah, things change gradually. I think some companies, in my opinion, absolutely got too soft to hire and retain talent. And what I mean by that is not like giving everything and then not stating like what you've said a few times as well is like outcomes. And yeah, I think as long as everyone has their outcomes and and those outcomes are critical to helping the business, the rest of the stuff you should be there to make them feel enabled and have a sustainable work life. Because I think that's the big piece. Like I can definitely put my hand up and say that in 2009 I felt burnt out because I was giving everything. All right, I was getting paid. I was getting paid decent bonuses and commission and stuff, but it was like I felt I was giving more of me than just my time, and like it probably crossed the line in terms of health. Whereas now I would never do that, and I don't expect it from my team. And on your note, you mentioned this is just I gave up caffeine last Monday, cold turkey, and I felt horrific for 2 days. Like I don't get headaches, but I had a headache for 2 days, and then after that, I felt pretty good. And then this week, I'm like, yeah, I feel really. It definitely takes me a little longer in the morning to just sort of like, kind of like get to the level. So it's like 2 glasses of cold water, and then it's like, okay, I'm starting to feel all right. Yeah, I'm not quite as like firing in the morning as I used to be, but I don't have any crash late afternoon. But I'll probably
I need to try it again. I was, no caffeine with my kids, being pregnant, before I got pregnant, getting pregnant, nursing, no caffeine. I went for years with no caffeine. Why I just started again, I don't know. But now
because it's great.
But now I have them. So now I can.
Yeah, that's actually a fair point. I think that's absolutely why I went from being like an espresso in the morning and 1 at lunch to like a 3 in the morning, 2 after lunch guy. Yeah, now mine are a bit older, so it's easier.
One of these days I'll be lemon water only, but till then,
yeah. I did it a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, it's just like there's always something, right? Let's wrap up in a few of these points that I want to kind of ask you about that we always ask our podcast guests. What advice would you give to founders and people teams like navigating salary and comp transparency? And what would your like 2 or 3 pieces of advice be to anybody like thinking about compensation and transparency, having a tough time with it?
Yeah, I think when you think about comp, you have to think about total comp. You don't just think about the salary. You have to think about, and that's everything. That's like what we know as total comp, but it's also, how rich and accessible are your benefits? Are you offering a parental leave? Are you offering, growth and learning and development within, within the organization that's actually going to develop someone's career? So I think look at whole package. Pay market, pay for the job. I am stingy. I'm not stingy with that. Pay for the job, right? Pay for the outcomes, because otherwise you're not going to get the best people. If you want the best people, you're going to pay for the job.
Well, they might not stay, right? Like for a reasonable period of time.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And, I think it can be an uncomfortable thing, especially for, as I mentioned earlier, like generationally. I remember when it was like, what do you mean you're talking about your compensation to your peer? How do you know your peer makes, 3% more than you do? You shouldn't talk about it. That's unprofessional. It's not unprofessional. Why shouldn't people? Right. So it's happening. Let's not pretend it's not going to happen. And, that's why we look internally for every promotion, for every hire. We want to make sure that, is there someone else that we need to adjust because we're making this hire now? Because now we know that, that market rate has really changed since this person was hired, for example. So I think just get used to it because it's really not going to be long before the law is everywhere. And it's just the right thing to do, right? It's just the right thing to do. And don't worry about if someone's making 30% more at your job. Good for them.
Yeah, I would rather work for a company where everybody was correctly paid and everybody was like engaged, bought in and motivated, because you'll do better, right? Like if it's kind of like, I hate always using sporting analogies, but since I've come to the US, it's so big that like everyone knows what some of the top players get in the football teams, right? They know that they're on X guarantee, X yearly package, like quarterbacks and whatever. But other players don't complain about that. They're like, no, we want that person to be really well paid, and we want the best person there because we'll all do better as a result.
That's right. That's right. And you know, I think as long as you're challenging people, you're clearly defining roles and expectations, and you're giving people good work. You're trusting them. You're letting them be flexible if they need to be flexible, if the role allows for it. Obviously, someone who's on a needs to answer the phone for a customer has to be on during those hours. But giving your team, especially in this remote environment, flexibility, and then tying it all back to we're all in this together. We are all one team. We're building the community. We're trying to be as ourselves as possible at work, and talking about things like therapy and talking about our all different kinds of families, and making space for people to be as authentic as they're comfortable being at work. And you hope that they're fully comfortable, and if not, you make changes to get them to make your environment where you do support that kind of inclusivity and comfort. But it's all, like, to me, I see it as just like all pieces of the pie that make a really incredible place to work. It's not just paying the highest salary. It's not just having the best benefits. It's not, it's not having unlimited PTO. And then exactly the kind of person and the kind of motivated, driven person that is going to be super successful. And then guess what? Your business is successful.
Yep, it is. It can be that. Yes, sounds easy. It can be, can't it? I know where I tell you where I know I've gone wrong in the past is, I think if you put mission first, which we talk to a lot of our clients about this, and we tend to target companies that are like doing useful things that impact people, because then you get the talent that want to do that. Like, they want to come along for the ride and they feel good about the work. Then the money kind of follows. And as long as it's not just money up front. For the last 10 years, if you were only about money, you'd go to like a FANG type place if you could get a job there. But even that's changed now. So it's like mission first, then like motivation and things that support a good living and outcomes, and obviously environment.
We had a really cool post from somebody earlier today on our community channel, and I mentioned CharterUp in the wild. So they snapped a picture on site in Albany, New York, providing critical transportation for necessities like food and medicine to displaced migrants. I mean, it's just like there really is a mission behind what we're doing, right? Providing access to churches and mosques. And, this person who was there and who happened to be on site and saw this was like, this is why I came here. This is why it really spoke to me. It's interesting. We have people with like really kind of spiritual backgrounds and who come from, we have people who come from nonprofits. We have people who come from that really, really mission driven work. And, it's because get cars off the road, charter a bus.
Yeah. I mean, I come from London. It's like, I have to drive everywhere here in Texas. It drives me nuts sometimes. Like it's fun at times. And then other times I'm like, I don't want to drive. Like, I just want to sit on a train and like, read or whatever. But
drive a minivan like I do. Then it's not fun to drive anymore.
Yeah. Just ferrying around. What's the, like, we're almost, we are way past time, which I knew that we would be. What is the thing that you find so much more difficult than it needs to be when it comes to hiring? Like wherever you go.
So much more difficult than it needs to be is, I think, that's a really tough one. This is going to sound like I'm making a pitch. I'm not making a pitch for CharterUp. I love CharterUp. I will make a pitch for CharterUp. But I think when you have the right process in place, when you do the things that we talked about, and your team is on board, and your team is fully committed to finding the right, candidates and finding the right people to keep building this business, because we have crazy lofty goals, right? We need the right people to do that. I used to say, like, how are you telling me this role is so critical and then you're canceling interviews 5 minutes before? How are you telling me this role is so critical and then you can't make a decision? I've handed you 5 amazing candidates. I won't tell you where this has happened my entire career. But
Yeah.
but that I'm not encountering that here, which is amazing.
Everyone's dialed in.
It really speaks to, to the leadership and to the team that was here before me, because it wasn't something that I had to change or had to, wrangle and wrestle people to make them do this the right way. So
yeah, that helps. We've just got obviously got smart, driven, and efficient people that want to get things moving, and then the incentives must be right as well. I saw something recently that I'd never heard the phrase before. There's someone who said it was like, show me an incentive and I'll show you the action. I think that's kind of like a big deal in the way the industry of technology and getting things done the right way. Cool. Well, look, if any other folks want to geek out with you, how do they connect with you? Just LinkedIn?
Well, it's on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. Good. Well, that was very good fun. Very insightful. And I think you clearly have a personal attachment to this whole mission of making people, organizations better. I think, some people it's just very much this is just business and that's how we're operating it. But I think you definitely you geek out on it, as you've told me before. And I think that comes through. The thing, you're obviously looking a step ahead at where's industry now, where does industry going? And I think, that's a great thing that people need to be a bit more like. I think a lot of people in the industry are let's just do what everyone's doing. Let's not break the mold or be first to do something in case it backfires. So you'll only get an edge from that. So look, thank you so much. I know you're incredibly busy. Appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to talk to us.
Always a pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Breakout. If you want to hear more, make sure to hit subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast to be the first to get notified when future episodes are released. If you like this show or want to share feedback, please leave a review so we can keep improving and share the word with other leaders in the tech talent space. If you have suggestions for topics we should cover, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Gareth.